Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode 11 of the Look Out Sir 40k podcast. We've gone all Christmassy because 'tis the season, and also because we went to Grand Tournament Heat 3 at Warhammer World for the Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament, and we spent quite a considerable amount of time talking about it, and it turns out it's incredibly complicated to get about 6 hours of content onto YouTube. We've had to break this down. So if any of you are curious why none of our episodes, or rather our episode 11, turned up on Saturday, it's because we had a logistical error with trying to get 6 hours of content onto YouTube. So what we've ended up doing is what you can see here, which is one of our segments of the Look Out Sir 40k podcast, episode 11, where we're going to be talking about the Grand Tournament Heat 3, our individual armies and performance within the tournament. Now, spoilers, I don't mean to be bold when I say this, but I will say this boldly. I did win that tournament, which is quite incredible. And if you want to hear about that, that'll be in one of the episodes. Funny story, the way I'm kind of recording this is I'm using this same pattern at the start of every one. So if you've had to listen to this 5 times over, sorry about that. But essentially, this episode will be about Richie and his what is essentially mixed Imperium, but mostly Elysians. And to be fair, when I say mostly Elysians, in Richie's case, it was mostly Elysians, although it was probably more 50-50. And then also, if you include the Marauder Destroyer, then that's not even technically Elysians either, and that's quite a big point chunk. So maybe, I don't know, 3/5 of his army was Elysians, maybe not even that, because he had a Knight Gallant and some other things, as well as the big plane. But he would tell you it's Elysians, and I suppose that's good enough, given the fact that it's not really, but whatever, works out just fine. So let's listen to Rich as he talks about his Elysians, the games he played, the people he met, and his overall tournament experience. Transitional noise. Woo!
Hello, it's Phil here, and I'm joined by Richard, and we're going to be talking about his GT Heat 3 results. So Richard, tell us about your army. Has it changed at all since we last chatted on the podcast?
It has. Hello everyone. Thank you for coming back on the podcast to talk about this. So yes, my list was the Elysian drop troops and knights list that we talked about previously. I did make some changes following the hard feedback that both Joe and Dan gave me about how to use Imperial Knights, and the advice I did swap out Ravager, instead went for Paragon Gauntlet with my Knight Gallant. That was a main change I did, and I'm very glad I did, for reasons that will come up as we talk about in the matches I had. But as a reminder of the list that I took a battalion of Elysian drop troopers. Their special ability being, for those who aren't familiar, is that they can all deep strike. I took a battalion, so I had 2 company commanders with power fists. I had 3 drop trooper squads of 9 guys, including the sergeant with a lasgun and 1 flamer. I had 2 special weapon squads with plasma guns. I had an officer of the fleet. I had 2 Tauruses with twin las cannons. I had 1 Vulture with a Punisher Gatling cannon. I had a heavy weapon squad with mortars. And then from then I had the Imperial Knight Super Heavy Detachment, which was led by a Knight Gallant, using heirlooms of the household and the other one that gets me a Warlord trait. So I had the Iron Bulwark and the Paragon Gauntlet, which gives me the 4+ invuln. And then basically a power fist which hits on 2s and does 8 damage per hit. And then 2 Armiger Warblades. And the final detachment was a super heavy auxiliary, which was the much celebrated Marauder Destroyer, without the missiles, because at this point their missiles were really expensive, so I didn't take those, and it was currently TBC if they've got any better in the chapter approved. But that was the we're still waiting to get concrete information on that. But that was the list. I don't think I forgot anything. I mean, that's what I took.
Cool. And what was your general strategy and synergy for the units?
So the general plan was going to be because the whole army can deep strike, with the exception of the knights, but you can't actually do that in practice, because half your points and half your units have to be on the board. So the standard strategy I took was that all 3 of the knights, the Vulture, the Taurus, The mortars and one of and my company commander, who was my warlord, would all deploy on the board, and then everything else, the free trooper squads, the special weapons squads, one of the company commanders, they would all deep strike. Both the flyers as well, the vulture and the marauder, they would all be on the board turn one, and then they would slowly just move up the board or hold what they needed to, whereas everything else would drop down where they needed to. The troop squads ideally dropping down onto objectives. There's plasma guns squads dropping down where I needed to kill something. That was the general strategy. It worked out pretty well. I didn't win, but the whole tournament, but it worked out pretty well. On the whole, I definitely learned some more tactics as I was playing. I definitely got better as the tournament went on. But the general idea was, that the Marauder and the Vulture would just kind of skirt the edges of the battlefield, taking out people who were camping on objectives, killing what they needed to. The Tauruses, using their speed and mobility on their twin las cannons, would kind of just hide out of the back, moving at least 10 inches to get a 5+ invuln, and then just kind of sniping whatever vehicles or knights they needed to. And then the Gallant, most important of all, his job was to find other knights and kill them. He was my primary knight killing option, deterrent and attacker. So wherever the biggest threat was on the other side of the board, the Knight Gallant would run straight forward and try and kill it. Turn one, if possible, if the dice would be on my side. But that was what would be nice, and that's the general approach.
Sounds sensible. And how did you get on in your first game?
So the first game was We Supply Drop. I was playing against a lovely chap called Carl, who was it was actually a very humbling experience. As I explained to him what was in my list, and halfway through explaining to me the list, he exclaimed, "Is this the list they were talking about on the Lookout Sir podcast?" And I was like, "Well, yes, it is." That was very nice to meet a listener on the first game, which is very cool. But he had a really nice he had Imperial Knight and Guard list. He had 3 knights altogether. He had 4. Yeah, he had 3 knights and an armiger that I had to try and deal with. One of them was a Castellan. I think it's the Castellan. The Castellan one is the one which is called the big guns as opposed to the more close combat stuff.
Yeah, the mini volcano cannon and the plasma.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Castellan. Yeah.
So I had not come up against that ever. I'd only read about it stats wise, so I had no idea how well that was how it was going to go down against that particular unit. But I hoped it would, I hoped I wouldn't get completely destroyed. Yeah, so we had 3 knights altogether: the Castellan, the one of the Melter, one with the Gatling, and then an Armiger, and then the Loyal 32 to one of the board collecting objectives. And I can't remember if I went first or second, but for the first couple of turns it was mostly moving up the board towards each other. I used the tactic with the Gallant, which was probably the scariest thing I had for him on the board, because none of his knights were particularly good in combat, was just to kind of run up the board and then rotating my iron shields so that I had the 3+ invuln against everything that he shot at me, which worked out very well because he fired almost everything he had at the Gallant, and it didn't do he only took a few wounds off it. From memory.
Warlord trait in full tilt is a 3-up, isn't it? Which is pretty, as I can attest, having done a test game, it's pretty difficult to deal with.
Yeah, well, it's rotate iron shield, so it gives you +1 to all your invulns, or to one particular type of invuln. So for the Gallant, I was putting it on the range attack. So with the Iron Bulwark Warlord trait, I meant his invuln went from 5 up to 4 up, and then to 3 up with the stratagem, which meant that he becomes incredibly survivable, especially when he's being shot at by a lot of big guns from across the board to try and take me out. And what was good is we had to. One thing I didn't mention before is my knights. I picked House Tyrannus very specifically so that all my knights would get 6 up, feel no pain. Which is something you sometimes forget about. So he had also done Tyrannus, so we kept reminding each other that that every time our knights lost a wound on a 6-up, it didn't. But also with House Tyrannus, you can get access to the In Our Darkest Hour stratagem, which means that when your knight is is killed but doesn't blow up for 3 CP on a 4+. It comes back to life with D3 mortal wounds. Sorry, with D3 wounds left. Which was handy because we both knew that we could do that, and we both did it a couple of times through the game. So we both kind of walked up the board. My Marauder and Vulture kind of flew around mopping up what infantry he had. In this particular game, the Tauruses didn't do very well at all with their 4 las cannons. In a test game that I had to play against you, Phil, you got to see the Tauruses on the best form they've ever been.
Yep, rolling well.
They rolled very well and took, like 20 wounds off your...
28 or 18, I think. Maybe it was something like that.
I think it was 18 wounds in one round of shooting from 2 Tauruses. Yeah. But they did terribly in this game. They were just... They didn't get shot at, and they were just kind of a more of an annoyance for him than anything else. But as the Gallant walked across the board, we did get into some combat, and the Gallant killed the Armiger. He killed. So my Armigers went up the battlefield and engaged his big knights, and the Gallant, who ended up on the other side of the board, targeted his armiger, which I did. I used CP to interrupt so that he didn't do any damage to my Gallant. So I killed the Armiger and then moved across the middle of the battle. Yeah. So he had 2 knights that moved forward, of which they were more the shooty variety. One had the melter, and they went into the combat they charged into my Armigers the same turn that I missed time my measurements, so I didn't get to charge with the Gallant. So his Armiger charged into my Gallant, but I used an interrupt so that I just quickly stomped on the Armiger and didn't lose any wounds to it in combat. Because while the Knight Gallant's really awesome, it has no saves in combat. So you hit it with anything powerful in combat, it's going to die, or at least take some wounds. So the Gallant on the Armiger, and then moved into the middle of the battlefield, which then proceeded to be, over the next few turns, a kind of knight killing field. As various knights died, got back up, died again. But meanwhile, during that, the Vulture and the Marauder just kind of flew around in like a holding pattern around the board, just shooting at the infantry he had, and once all the infantry was gone, trying to do a little bit of damage to his knights, but not being particularly successful. Then my Gallant was able to charge into combat with one of his knights and kill it instantly. Pick it with all I need to do, because when you run in when you're hitting on twos, wounding on 2s with the Paragon Gauntlet, you're going to do somewhere between 24 and 40 wounds on a knight, which for any knight is enough to kill it instantly. Tyrannus, it makes a slight difference with the Feel No Pains. Yeah. But he killed the first knight with 30 wounds. Of course, 36 wounds. He made his Feel No Pains wasn't enough. It died. Then the Gallant moved forward, but then my Gallant got shot to death. Then the Castellan turned around and shot it to pieces, which is very unfortunate. But fortunately for me, I was able to use the in our Darkest Hour stratagem. I had enough CP left, so I had an extra one in case I needed to reroll that 4+. I didn't need to, so I got straight back up with two wounds, and then charged in to one of the other knights he had and killed that. At this point, the Castellan didn't actually shoot at the Gallant. I can't remember the exact scenario where it went down, but my Gallant did end up in melee combat with the Castellan, at which point I charged in and did 40 wounds on it, which was ridiculous. Yeah, at that point it was there's the other stratagem that was very handy to have with the Gallant, which was that you can at the beginning of the turn you can play a CP and then you have your full profile, so it doesn't matter that you've taken wounds, you're just still working at your full level. Yeah. But at this point, the Gallant was pretty injured, and the other knights are most of the rest of my forces at this point were slowly whittling down and dying, aside from the flyers. It all came down to a final last stand when the Gallant killed his Castellan, and then he unsurprisingly used our Darkest Hour to get the Castellan back up, who then promptly destroyed my Knight Gallant. I couldn't bring it back again because you can only bring it back once per game. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of my army, all the Castellan, fell to massed las gunfire and plasma gunfire from all my troopers, who then proceeded to blow up and take almost all of them down with it.
Oh no!
So it was a fun game. It was a fun first game. I definitely enjoyed it because there was lots of knights blowing up and taking other knights with them. I spent a lot of time talking about like Gallant in that, but yeah, he was the star of the show in that particular game. Just walking forward and just kind of smashing his way through all the other knights while taking out the stuff. It was a good game. I definitely enjoyed it. It was very explosive, and I certainly lost more of my army due to exploding knights than by getting shot at. But it was very fun.
So how did you do in that one? Did you win it or did you lose?
I did. I won that one. So I was one victory in, setting what I hoped would be setting the tone for the day. By winning my first game. But that was a good fun game.
Oh, nice! Props to him for being a fan of the show and having.
He was a good bloke. I felt a bit bad because I kind of did destroy him completely, and I felt bad about that. I did feel really bad. But we chatted throughout the rest of the day. He was a really good bloke. A lot of time for him as well. So yeah, so shout out to you, Carl, if you are listening. And you haven't unsubscribed as a result. Cool. So then we moved on to game 2. I was feeling very confident. I thought, yeah, this list is great. I'm going to have some fun with this. I wanted to have some more fun with the Marauder because I didn't get an opportunity to drop the bombs of it. So I was like, okay, let's see what else I can do in this next game. Let's go up against that. And what I came up against was a very different army. It still had quite a lot of knights in it, but it was a list that as soon as I saw it, I knew I was in trouble. So he had Imperial Knights list, which was led by a Knight Atropos, which is a Forge World Knight and is very much referred to as the Knight Killer, which is very true. It definitely does that very well. And he had four Helverins, Armiger Helverins with the autocannons. He then had the Loyal 32, which, for those not familiar, and I apologize not clarifying it before, is just an Streminatarum detachment of 2 commanders, 3 troop squads to get those 5 CPs. But he also had 2 Vultures with Punisher cannons, which was immediately made me think, oh dear, this is going to be painful. And I deployed for this very similar to how I did for the previous game. I put the same troops in reserve to arrive by deep strike. Which was probably a mistake because it meant that there was less things. He has less things for him to try and shoot on table in turn 1. Because what happened in turn 1 was the Vultures. So he had turn 1, and in that first turn, the Vultures flew across the board and destroyed my. Well, they destroyed my Vulture with combined with Helverin fire. They destroyed my Tauruses, so I had no roving las cannon fire.
Did he use the stratagem on the Helverins to shoot at the flyers without the -1?
No, because they didn't shoot at they shot at the armigers. And I think one of the guys he didn't use the stratagem to get the extra bonuses. No, I know Joe's a big proponent of that, but he didn't do that. He just shot me down and wheeled down my wounds. And then the Knight Atropos, it looks pretty imposing because it was very big. But it was slightly ridiculous because it was House Raven, which meant that when it advances and charges, it gets +2 to its move, +2 to that move. But it has a standard move of 14 inches and it has an advance of 2d6. So you can do some basic sums there and realize that he can get, what was that, 14 plus like 21. He can get about 30 plus inches. He can get well over 30 inches across a board in a turn, and that's with charging. And he can move, and he can move, and because he's House Raven, he can move and assault and move and advance and still shoot all his weapons. So he moved across the board. He's got a las cutter which he used to destroy one of my armigers and then take a pot shot off at the Gallant. He then had some other weird gun which almost destroyed the Gallant, but they charged in the combat and finished it off.
So he was able to move, advance, and then still charge?
Yes, because he went full tilt.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, he went full tilt to do that. So yeah, he moved 14. He then advanced 10. He then charged like 9.
Wow, that's some good rolls.
Yeah, I mean, it was at the distance they were from each other from the board. I had no. With the you can. I'm used to be. From the practice games. I'm used to seeing like, oh yeah, a knight could do like a turn 1 charge or something. It's about 25 inches away. This was over 35. Yeah, something like 35, and he was able to do it because it just moves so far.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I should make 35. No, 35 is probably no. That's it's over 30. It was just over 30. But it's just the movement of 14, and then it's the 14, and then the 2d6 plus 2, and then the charging of 2d6 plus 2.
Yeah, that's really good.
That just adds up and is ridiculous. So at the end, and there was little I could do about it because of the amount of firepower he had. So at the end of turn 1, I had lost the vulture, I'd lost both Tauruses, I'd lost 1.5 armigers, and I'd lost the gallant. So I already knew the game was over at this point because I just didn't have enough stuff. I had nothing that could actually deal with what he had. I still had the Marauder, which was good. That flew across, dropped some bombs on one of his infantry squads that was capturing an objective, fired all of its weapons into one of the vultures. Didn't do as much damage as I would have liked, mostly because there are certain things the Marauder destroyer is good for, and killing other flyers isn't one of them. Because it's got a ballistic skill hitting on 4s, so when you move to shoot a flyer, you're hitting on 5s. So it's not the best for doing that, and I rolled pretty poorly as well. And then that game was essentially already over. My troops had come down, but my troops came down on turn 2. But by the time they came down, he'd already had 2 turns, so I didn't have much left. By the time the rest of my troops dropped in, and they was just like, yeah, here's some extra things, shoot them. The one saving grace I did have is that I did drop all my guys in, drop into cover. I used all the CPs I've been saving to do things like our Darkest Hour, which I couldn't do because the night blew up. So that was fun. Yeah, my gallant blew up, so I couldn't do Darkest Hour.
Could you not? Oh wait, so you blew up and then you re-rolled it, and you still blew up?
Yeah, I blew up and I used the re-roll to not blow up, and it failed.
Oh, that's harsh.
Yeah, so he blew up, which was no fun. But then the one saving grace I have is that, well, all the rest of my troops dropped in, tried to do a bit of like token gesture damage. I mostly just had a bit of fun just trying to run them in and gain control of the middle of the board. Which they did by when the game ended. We ended on turn 4 in the end. I think it was turn 4 or 5. We ended it. No, yeah, we went the full turn. Went to turn 5. But my warlord had survived. My warlord had been just sitting in combat with other guardsmen, just punching his way through them all with his power fist, and had survived all those rounds of combat. He dropped in turn 2, and he was just fighting guardsmen in the middle of the board in a ruin. So the one saving grace I had is that I didn't give him Slay the Warlord, even though he had as good as one from turn 1.
Oh, nice. I mean,
so that was so valuable lessons out in that. Night Atroposes are very, very, very painful. There's not much. If you're with my list, my Knight Gallant was my primary. This is how I deal with knights thing. And even with rotating iron shields and all that, he just had so many guns that he could take it out. So by that point, once I lost my gallant, I had nothing I could do to deal with his knight. His knight's always Knight Atropos, which didn't. To be fair, his Knight Atropos is designed to kill other knights, so it didn't have too much it could do, but it did take out my Marauder in the subsequent turns. So not so that game was not particularly fun.
How many did he have in total?
He had one big one, which was a Knight Atropos, and then I'm just looking at the screenshots here. He had 4 or 5 Helverins.
All right, so he didn't have another big one. It was just the Atropos and the little Helverins.
Yeah, just the only big knight he had was the Atropos. One thing I will say is it was a very, very good-looking army. It was, even though it did completely destroy me, it was really nice to look at. It had like a grey. The colour scheme was kind of grey, and then lots of hazard panels with like black and yellow stripes. So
was
very
it
cool.
Was it one that got into the cabinet for best army? Oh, it did.
It was in the best army cabinet, and I thought it would be because it was a really nice army to look at when it's destroying everything you've got. It's not as fun. But I definitely lost that game, and but I learned some valuable lessons.
Fair enough.
In that game for how to deal with that kind of stuff, which was to not do it the way I need to have different tactics. I should have had more on the board. I should have deployed further back, or just been luckier. I was, if I'd had turn one, that could have been a very different game. But I don't think it would have been. I think I'd won. I'd lost that game as soon as it began because his list was very, very specific, and you could easily deal with what I had.
Yeah,
sadly.
I guess the only easy improvement you could have made is when you were deploying, asking him what's the maximum move that knight can do, and then he would have, if he told you up front.
He did tell me.
30. Oh right, but were you that's unlikely?
He completely told me, and I was just like, oh, I guess. And I kind of looked at the measurements. I'm like, there's not really much I can do about this. I guess because on the Warhammer World tables, there's often so it's quite easy just to move around the board and get to stuff. I could have potentially deployed better and had the Gallant survive. I think that game with that the only way I could have potentially won that. And wait, no, I'm sorry, I am telling the story wrong. No, I missed a bit. He didn't. He killed my Gallant. He did kill my Gallant in turn one, but he killed it in my turn one because he didn't kill the Gallant. I then charged it in my turn, thinking I would kill it, and I failed because he had a 5+ invuln in combat, which he uses Iron Shields to make 4+ invuln in combat. So even though I hit him, even though I got 5, I did 5 hits to him, which would have done 40 wounds. He made all of his invulnerable saves.
So he used rotate Iron Shields.
Yes, so it's important I mention that because some of the Forge World Knights do have the advantage that they have. Your standard Imperial Knights from a Games Workshop Codex doesn't have an invulnerable save in combat unless you give it there's a specific relic called Sanctuary, which will give you a 5+ invuln in combat. But most knights don't have. Most knights do not have that as standard. There's a few knights that you can get from Forge World that do have that as standard, of which the Knight Atropos is one of them. So and you can use rotate Iron Shields to increase your invulnerable save by 1, and it doesn't specify whether it's in the fight phase or in the shooting phase.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I was just checking in the book because I was like, I'm sure it's just shooting phase, but you're right, it isn't. It's just until the end of the phase, so you could use it in close combat as well.
I remember things when he said it. I said, no, surely it's only shooting, but it's because you rarely ever use it in combat because you don't have an invuln in combat. On the whole, for an Imperial Knight, my Gallant got all his hits and did all his wounds onto it, and then he made all his invulnerable saves.
Wow!
So I was very unlucky. I could have gone. No, he didn't. He failed one of them, and he then did a reroll, so he didn't lose it. So he used. Yeah. So it was a tough matchup because it's the one kind of knight that the Gallant can't just instantly walk up to and smash. Is one that's got an invulnerable save in combat. Something that's got an invulnerable save in combat is a problem for a Knight Gallant.
Yeah.
The average knight was just gone. It's just a Knight Gallant with the Paragon Gauntlet, which does 8 wounds per hit. It's like you might as well just go away. You're done. But when you've got invuns in combat, it's a completely different story.
Totally. Anyway, so one up, one down.
One up, one down.
At this point, last game of the day on the Saturday.
So, this Saturday was a very long day. So, I was feeling a little bit dejected because I was like, I just got my ass kicked. That's no fun. Went into the final game against one of the Italian contingent who all came over from, I forget the name of their store, but I played one of the Italian group. And he had a Blood Angels and I think it was Minotaurs list. But it was a Space Marine list, which was very interesting to see. I think he also had a Loyal 32 in there for good measure. But he had Space Marines with some scouts. He had 3 units of 5 aggressors with the grenade launchers and bolter gauntlets.
Mm-hmm.
A Leviathan Dreadnought with storm cannons. 2 Smash Captains. some special character whose name I have forgotten, but I'll try and look it up. I'll have to look it up on Battleground or something while we're talking about. He had a special Minotaur's character.
Was this the one with the spear?
I think so. He doesn't have a model, so there's no official model for it. So
Oh, really? I thought there was only like 2 Minotaur characters, and they all had models, unless they discontinued it, which might be the case.
I'm gonna look it up while I'm talking to you and try and hope it so no one notices.
So it wasn't a chapter master then, I presume.
I don't believe it was. No, it was. He had a special rule. Someone else might remember who it was. The name, but what he did was he enabled all members of that chapter to reroll wounds. Was the thing he did.
It may well be. I can't remember his name. I think there's a guy who's like dragging.
I know, I've got it here. Yeah, no, it was. The name was Malakim Thoris, and it wasn't Minotaurs. It was the Lamenters. I got that wrong. So it was Lament, and they were led by Malakim Thoros, who's not particularly dangerous. Actually, I take that back. He's got his main thing is that every infantry, bike, and dreadnought within 6 inches can reroll failed wounds.
Mm.
He's got a 12-inch range melter pistol, and he's got a big sword that's treated like a power fist, and that you get -1 to hit, but it hits with strength 7, -4 AP, and D3 wounds. But he mainly existed in his army to be a reroll wounds element, because there's some quite good synergies he was running that I wasn't fully prepared for, because I'd rarely seen aggressors be used in quite the way he was using them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had turn 1, so I kind of moved forward, moved up the board to see if I could deal with. The Gallant didn't have anything he could charge with, so he just kind of moved his 12 inches to get up there. Whereas the Armigers also moved ahead at the front, because I was a little bit concerned about I didn't know what was going to be going on. Did some shooting, a lot of the stuff he had, but they were either in cover or he used the stratagem, so all his stuff got extra +1 to their cover saves. Which was a little annoying, because when I'm firing at them with my Marauder, which has only got -1 AP, and the Vultures, I didn't really do much damage in that first round of combat. The first round of shooting, so I did lots of shooting but didn't do too much damage. And then his turn 1 happened, and it's been a while since I played against a Smash Captain. So a lot of the time I was like, I'm sorry, what? As it happened. But the short version of what happened was one of his Smash Captains. A lot of CP was used. He redeployed across the board, then did a 3d6 charge, which I couldn't fight Overwatch against.
That's what happened to me in my game 4. Yeah.
So the short version is the Marauder Destroyer was gone in turn 1 because the Smash Captain just flew up to him and then killed him. And then, which wasn't even the most painful thing in that turn, because which was quite a blow, having the Marauder to being destroyed in turn 1. But then I saw I got to witness firsthand the sheer power of what his core strategy was to his list, which was his aggressors, because it was his turn 1. Because I advanced towards him, all his aggressors were in range, so they could shoot twice, and they fire a ludicrous amount of shots. They fire like 6 shots each. They fire like 6 + D6 shots each, which they can fire twice. And he had 15 of them. And then he used a strategy used on the Leviathan Dreadnought he had with them, which was like Will of the Ancients or something. What it did was it meant that all friendly units in the same chapter within 6 inches could reroll hits, or reroll ones to hit, along those lines. So basically, these 15 models with 6 + D6 shots each, twice, fired all of their shots. I think they even have more than that. There might have been some like grenade as well. They basically destroyed one of my They destroyed both my armor just fell to bullets that came from this. So that was a very painful lesson to learn. I need to be worried about them because he was just rolling dice for ages. It was like playing against your gun line, Phil, but this guy's Space Marines. And he just rolled all these dice, and then both my armor just fell to small arms fire, which was quite shocking and painful.
Wow, that's a bit crazy.
And then his loyal forces were moving up the board to capture objectives. Then turn 2 happened. And we move into turn 2, and I dropped in all my trooper squads onto or near the other objectives, so that they could then start to contest or just shoot what the stuff that he had on his objectives. The biggest concern I had though at this point was that he had 2 smash captains. First was the one that was in the middle of the board, which just killed them. The Marauder. So it was slightly overkill, but I just charged him with the Gallant, who just stamped on him to death. Because partly because that would also get the Gallant out of range of his what are they called, the aggressors, because I didn't want to have to deal with that. Deal with that in this turn. So I got out of the range of the aggressors. The rest of my squads kind of just hunkered down in cover. I moved up. I scoped around the back of my Tauruses who were picking off stuff. They were a big letdown during this game because they were great. They hit every time. They wounded every time. But then the dice gods thought I was making leadership tests. So every time I rolled to wound, I'd roll a 1, which is very frustrating when you've got las cannons.
Yeah.
But that was my turn 2. I killed his smash captain. My vulture flew around, took out one of his squads that was on an objective, which enabled one of my squads then to be closer to it. Then all his aggressors opened fire, and they took out my vulture in his turn. They also fired at what else? They fired at one of my squads. They moved up. They were out of range of everything, so they moved forward. And they killed. I'm trying to think if we had Terminators or not. I can't think he did. No. And they killed one of my other trooper squads, so I was a bit open in the middle. I was running out of bodies because of the amount of shots the aggressors were putting out. But I had I'd taken out one of the aggressor squads because my plasma gun had dropped down close enough to them. So one of my favourite unit in the tournament was probably my plasma gun tactic, which is the 2 special weapon squads with plasma guns supported by a commander, because I could drop them into rapid fire range and then issue to both squads to take aim, which meant you got 12 plasma gun shots, overcharge, re-rolling 1s. So I think only 2 died during the entire weekend due to overshot plasma, but they were able to take out 1 squad of aggressors simply because of weight fire the plasma. And then in the following turn is when I used the old Gallant full tilt trick, who charged in. He did a multi-charge into 2 squads of aggressors and the Leviathan Dreadnought, and he stepped on the aggressors and punched the Leviathan Dreadnought with some very lucky dice rolls, because I split it out so the exact amount of damage I needed to do to kill them both was done. It didn't quite work, so I had to death grip the Leviathan Dreadnought to finish it off, which is another good strategy if you have a gauntlet on a night, a favourite one. And then
if you do it on a vehicle, I think you can, can't you? Yeah, for some reason I thought it might
do it on anything.
Infantry, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, you can do it on anything, cool. Which is really handy. Yeah, you can do it on anything. So I was able to finish off his Leviathan Dreadnought. Then next turn, his surviving smash captain charged into combat with the Gallant. Didn't do enough wounds to kill it. Well, he did, but I managed to make enough feel no pain saves. So he didn't finish off my Gallant, and then so I stepped on him. At this point, the Gallant was kind of just ruining the guy's day, just kind of stepping on his big tough stuff. But his special character, Malakim, did then finish off the Gallant in combat, and I failed my dice roll to bring it back to life. So this was turn, I want to say 4, and at this point we were both running out of bodies on the board. So we were effectively trying to see who could have the most amount of we each camped on certain objectives of our own, and it's a case of who could actually try and take out the remaining ones to claim victory. So as we went into turn 5, he was winning by 1 because he had slightly more objectives than I did. But while I was contesting some of them, he was winning by 1 because he got first blood. Is why he was winning in that sense. Then, as we went into turn 6, we're just picking up more and more of our troops that we had left. Malakim was slowly walking across the board, who was still alive annoyingly, but he was quite a big threat because he had his melter pistol and he could destroy anything in combat. But I did have both my Tauruses, who were still on form for hitting Malakim and then rolling 1s to wound. So they were slowly wounding Malakim, but not. They weren't doing nearly enough damage to actually kill him. Sadly, he was on 1 wound at the end of the game. But then Malakim came and he killed one of the Tauruses, which was trying to cap an objective with his melter pistol. Then on turns, we rolled to see if there was a turn 6. There was a turn 6, and I went on. I charged. No, I didn't charge until one of my Tauruses was already in combat with. He had a heavy bolter set in gun emplacement thing like a Thunder High cannon, but with heavy bolters on it. One of my Tauruses had charged that on like turn 4 just to lock it in combat so that he couldn't shoot at one of my troop squads. But as a last ditch, which was worked, it worked very well. But as a last ditch attempt, I then reversed out of that combat because I was just in range of getting into contest another objective, which was near one of his commanders. To contest that objective, one of his company commanders from his loyal 32. So that was contested. So at the end of my turn, I was contesting, so it was a draw. In his turn, so he could win, he shot at the Taurus but didn't kill it. And because he had a power sword, he thought that he would, and the Taurus only had 1 wound left. He decided to charge into the Taurus with his company commander. And I don't know if you've seen someone roll a 6/6 of a twin las cannon for Overwatch fire, but his company commander charged my Taurus, and I managed to get 6/6 to hit, and then wound twice, and then he failed both of his invulnerable saves for his company commander. And there were 2. I actually rolled well for the wounds that time. So his company commander charged into my Taurus, died in the process, which then that objective was open on the table for me. Okay. So at the end of turn 6, I was winning by 1. We then rolled to see if the announcer said there's 10 minutes left for the game, and then we rolled to see if there was a turn 7, and there was a turn 7, and it was in turn 7 that the game did not go my way finally, sadly, because it was in turn 7 that Malakim decided to. Well, it turns out he was just in range of my Taurus to fire his melter pistol thing with its 12-inch range. Forge World guns, honestly, and then he just one-shot into Taurus. It wasn't my last thing on the board, but it was the last thing I had that could possibly contest for that objective. So ultimately, at the end of turn 7, he'd won by 1 objective. A lot of the other objectives across the board, we were hunkered down on that. No one was going to give them up. So I was a little disappointed that I didn't make. I was unlucky in my saves, and that in the final round of turn 7, the tide swung back into his favour.
Wow.
It was
super close, and I guess you only lost it because of first blood as well. Then
I only lost it because of first blood.
I mean, if it was a fact, you'd draw.
Yeah, we were competing over a 2-point objective. In this one, I think it was So. It was not the first blood would have helped swing it because he only won by 1 point, but yeah, it was a very tough down to the wire game. I could have made some possibly better tactical choices. On one of the objective in my deployment zone, I ended up locking down one of his squads in combat, who charged in to prevent them from being able to capture the objective. I perhaps should have stayed back and shot a bit more and weathered that, but that was very important. But it came down to just bad luck at the end, and it it was my favourite game of the tournament, easily, because it was so close and it came down to turn 7. It was a really good game. I was sorely disappointed that I didn't win, because at this point I was 2 losses and 1 win. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to qualify anymore now. So slightly dejected going at the end of the day, but it was such a really good game, and I had a really good time doing it. So I was looking forward to day 2 of, okay, let's just have some fun games against some interesting opponents.
Cool.
Is what I was hoping for going into the final day. So then we got into the final day, and I was pleasantly surprised that I was like, okay, I want to see something different. I don't want to see knights or smash captains. Instead, what I saw was a Thousand Sun and Chaos Demons list, which was really exciting because I previously had played those 2 armies myself. I haven't used them for a while, mostly because I find psychic powers a bit too random on whether or not they're actually going to go off or not. I like to have a little more guarantee of. I mean, obviously, you're always rolling a dice for anything that happens, but with psychic powers, you just like make a dice roll to be able to make a dice roll.
Yeah.
Which I don't really. That doesn't sit well with me. So I kind of stopped doing those for those guys for a while. I probably will go back because I do have I do have a Kairos Fate Weaver to paint up, and a, what's his name, the big guy to paint up. Is Magnus. Yes, I've got a Magnus I need to paint up as well.
Are those the 2 that he had as well?
He did, yes. He had. It was a really beautiful, brightly coloured army. It was great. He had a Chaos Space Marines. Well, not Chaos Marines. A Thousand Suns detachment, which curiously didn't have any Thousand Suns in it. What he had Magnus. He had Ahriman. He had 2 Zangor sorcerers on discs, and he had 2 squads of. Oh, come on, he had a bunch of Zangors.
Yeah, and he had Brimstone Horrors and stuff as well, didn't he? So
He did. Yeah. The Chaos Demon. And that was the Thousand Suns detachment. The Chaos Demons detachment he had was led by Kairos Fate Weaver, and he had a big blob of flamers, which was great to see because I've always been a big fan of the flamers. Us in the Zench flamers, not just flamer as a weapon. He had a big blob of those. He had a herald on a disc. He had a herald in a chariot, and then he had a ton of blue horrors and brimstone horrors, which all and those horrors all skulked at the back. This was a hammer and anvil deployment, so there was a bunch of objectives in the back field for him, where all his horrors were kind of camping on. And this game, he told me all the distances about how his spells work, and I had to be concerned about the mortal wounds that would be coming out, because the mortal wounds spam was something I was very concerned about. I was like, how am I going to deal with that? And I asked him lots of questions about what he's got, what everyone's range was, and the range of mortal wound drops for Ahriman, Magnus, and Kairos is ridiculous. Well, it's not ridiculous, it's far. So I was like, okay, they've got a really big distance I've got to cover. So I used the advantage of the last. Actually, yeah. This is one thing I should have mentioned earlier. Is often the last unit I would deploy was always my knights. I'd make sure everything else was placed first in the deep striking thing, so I could see where I'd need to place them. And what I ended up doing was he placed Magnus right at the edge of his deployment zone, so he could get in range of stuff. And I placed my knight directly in front of Magnus. And I'm like, there's only one way this is going to go down. It's like I've got to deal with that one way or the other. So I'm not going to like hang back. I'm just going to go all in and see what I can do.
Ballsy. I like it.
I was like, well, I saw what happened by not doing that against the Atropos. It's like, you've got to go in and just hope for the best. So that's what I did. I went. I won the roll off, which was nice. I usually didn't because I had lots of different small units I had for flexibility and movement. So I had 16 altogether. So I often didn't get the +1 for going first, but I did go first in this game. And then I played sensible. I just ran straight across the board. So all my troopers builders moved on to objectives. Both the Vulture and the Marauder, they outdid themselves in this game because they just flew immediately the full 45 inches from my deployment zone all the way into his, and they just unleashed firepower on all of his horrors. Of the various squads, I think I took out, between the two of them, I took out 3 squads of 10 Brimstone Horrors.
Nice. Did you manage to drop any bombs?
I didn't. No, I did. Yeah, I dropped bombs on 1 squad of Horrors.
Yeah, cool.
And then finished them off with. So I dropped bombs on 1 squad of the Brimstone Horrors and finished them off with auto cannons. Then the Heavy Bolter and Assault Cannon fired into another squad, and then the Vulture also flew and finished off with another squad on its own. So a lot of his objective grabbing stuff was gone in the first turn, just from the fire from the flyers. Then when it came to Magnus, who was something I was concerned about because he's big and tough and scary, I full tilted across the board with the Gallant. So I moved 12, I advanced 6. I was very lucky on that roll. And then I made my charge roll and I rolled a 10. So I got straight into combat in turn 1. He was a little concerned, but I think he saw that as a possibility that he didn't want to, he wasn't happy that it was happening. He was slightly less happy when I did 40 wounds onto Magnus.
Wow. So did
Magnus,
you hit with everything and wound with everything then?
I hit with everything and wounded with everything, and he had his inruns and he didn't make enough of them.
Right.
So Magnus died. He didn't make his inruns. He used rerolls.
What is his invuln on?
It's 4 up, I believe.
And is it? Can he use a psychic to improve it? But because he didn't go first, he didn't get a chance to. Is that right?
He did that in the future on that. Well, he used his improved invuln whenever we did on Kairos.
Yeah.
Rather than Magnus. But yeah, I can't remember if Magnus is 3 or 4. So someone's probably saying it's 3, it's 4. Whatever it was, he didn't roll high enough. So I think it might well have been 3. But he just didn't. Yeah, he didn't roll high enough, and I did just enough wounds to finish off Magnus without even needing to use Death Grip or anything. Right. So that was a good solid attack for turn 1. And I considered yeah, that was a ballsy move, and it paid off perfectly. So then I moved in. I consolidated into. I thought I'll be smart, I'll be clever. I'll consolidate into combat with Ahriman that whole time. I'm forgetting that he's on a disc and doesn't care. And then we went on to the. I think I did a good solid blow in that turn. I was very happy with that. What else happened? And on the other side, meanwhile, on the other side of the board, the Tauruses did a few. They took about 6 wounds off Kairos as well, so that was good. His next turn, things could have gone. Things could have gone very badly in his turn because he used. I think it's Treason of Zinch. He tried to cast that with Kairos, which enables you to take control of any character that isn't the Warlord, and take control of them for that turn. And he used it on my Knight Gallant because it's a character. And it's got like a Kairos just basically can't not cast spells, so he managed to cast it, but he had to roll higher than my leadership on 2d6. Mm-hmm. I had leadership 8, so we needed to get he needs to get higher than my leadership on whatever dice he had to do. And again, he used a reroll, but he missed out by 1. I think he got a 6. If I remember, I think he got a 6 and a 1, or he got a 6 and a 2, and he rerolled it and got 6 and a 1.
So what phase was he doing this in?
His psychic phase.
Okay.
So what it would have done, it would have enabled him to. What it enabled him to do would be to take over my Gallant and then charge into combat and destroy both of the armatures. Is what he was trying to do.
Oh.
And due to poor unlucky dice rolls on his part, he wasn't able to do that. At that point, it's like that was almost a waste of one of Kairos' spells because he could have been using Smite or something else to do more damage, and then he kind of buffed a lot of the rest of his units to give them extra damage. And credit to him, one thing I like that he did this, because it's the kind of thing I would do, is he then, using Ahriman's spells, he used Ahriman's spells to buff himself. So he has a spell of Zench, which basically gives you extra attacks and extra strength. And then he charged my Gallant with Ahriman to try and take him on in combat, which I thought was incredibly ballsy, and I was willing him. I almost wanted him to win because it would have been amazing. But the result was, because of the spells he used, and I can't remember which spell it was, and someone who's listening is probably telling me what it is right now, but basically what it did is it meant that Ahriman was hitting he was hitting Gallant, I think it was 2s or 3s, but then wounding on 4s because he had strength 8 at this point. And he did really well. He took like 9 wounds off the Gallant. But then the Gallant turned around and tried to crush him with the Paragon Gauntlet. However, Ahriman made all of his invulnerable saves, so he was a lot more survivable.
Oh wow! Did you then use Death Grip on him?
I did use Death Grip on him, and that didn't work either.
What?
No, I Death Gripped him when I took 3 wounds off him with Death Grip, and then because he had +2 strength that turn, I rolled a 1 and he rolled a 5, or 6. So basically, he broke out of the Death Grip.
Oh no!
So Ahriman survived the Death Grip, and then it went on to my turn. After that, and then it's mostly just kind of clearing up. At this point, the plasma troopers dropped in. I was able to drop them 12 inches away from Kairos, and they just lit him up, and he fell, which was nice. Ahriman didn't die. Ahriman was... I shot him with a lot of things, hoping someone would kill him. Just shoot him with more things than I would have liked, but I think it was ultimately an Armiger that shot him and killed him. Whereas then the Mortar Destroyer did a bank turn and fired all of its bullets into the Flamer squad, which was when the autocannons came in handy because of the 2 damage. Took out almost all the Flamers. The Gallant moved to stomp on a few other things. Kairos, who was still alive at this point, if I remember, he got finished off by the Tauruses. So that was nice to see the Tauruses owning their points for once, because they weren't doing so well in that game. And then the rest of the game was kind of just a slowly just wiping up the board until his Zangors turned up in turn at the end of his next turn. They did like the emerge from the warp, so they kind of just teleported onto the board via deep strike, and they charged behind my lines, just kind of just to ruin the day of my mortar squad and my trooper squad who were camping some objectives in the backfield. And Zangors are surprisingly survivable when they're making lucky saves of 6. But my commander Johnson, Sergeant Johnson, my commander, who was in the backfield, got charged by them, and he did a good job of surviving combat. With those guys in there, he went altogether about 3 rounds of combat with them, with Zangors, and there was 20 of them. I mean, he didn't fight 20 of them all the time, but he took down about 7 of them by attacking combat, then falling back, get back in the fight himself, and then charging back in.
Nice.
With his power fist. But he eventually did fall to the Zangors, and then the Zangors all wiped out. So I ended up tabling the guy. It was I enjoyed that game. It was very different because I didn't normally have to come up against psychic powers. I don't think he enjoyed it because Magnus died in turn 1, but that's what you get for deploying 24 inches away from a Knight Gallant, I suppose, or giving me that opportunity. But that was a good game, and I specifically liked that game a lot as well because all my troops got to have be really important in that game because the Destroyer and the Vulture were flying around the backfield just shooting all of his troops, all of his smaller things. But my drop trooper squads landed in good positions, were shooting like his Flamers and his Heralds that were there doing the little bit of damage they could, and the Plasma Guns did a great job in whittling down people as well. So that was a really good game. I enjoyed that a lot.
Sounds good. So that is 2 wins then and 2 losses. Is that right?
2 wins and 2 losses, I think, which is good. I put me on where I predicted I would be. I thought I'd have 2 wins, and I'd be robbed once. And at this point, I had 2 wins. And I had potentially been robbed by that close game. So I was going into the final game. Quite upbeat. I thought this could be good. Got good feeling about how I could do now. I had no idea what kind of list I was going to come up against. I finally hoped it wouldn't be Dan. I knew it wouldn't be because he was winning. He was at the top tables. But I was like, it'd be nice to see like orcs or something. I really wanted to play that the orc player who had the boats. He had like the pirate themed stuff using all the boat, like ghost ships.
He was also on the top tables. He was doing
annoyingly so. Yeah. So that would have been a cool list to play against. So I had no idea what I was going to come up against. in the final game. But fortunately,
I think
it could have been. But instead, I got Imperial Knights with the Loyal 32.
another army.
Again, which was very well painted. The list I came up against, and it's a very well painted list, and he had a lot of knights. So he had a tooled up warlord with Iron Bulwark and some other stuff. He had his own gallant. It was the first time I'd played a few people had knights. It was the first time I'd seen another guy who had a gallant. And he had this guy who I can't remember his name, but his list was everything I'd been told a knight's list would be before I went to the tournament. So he had a few knights. He had a big guard, Astra Militarum battalion of 3 troop squads, mortars, a big conscript blob. It was everything. It was the more traditional what I'd expected to see. So while he had his knights moving up the middle of the field, there was his conscript blob in front of them, so I couldn't do it, which kind of put me in a position where I couldn't really do anything about that. Because shooting 20 conscripts, some of which are in cover, is a very tricky thing to do. So he went first. I didn't get to go first in this game, in this particular round. He fired a lot of his guns at all my stuff. He was obviously most concerned about the gallant in the middle. So I rotated my iron shields. He shot it a lot. Almost all the shots bounced off, so he wasted a lot of his rounds on that. He was a little bit worried about my flyers, so he fired a few shots at them, but didn't do too much damage. He was concerned about the armigers, so he did fire a lot of shots into the armigers. He took out one of those, and then we moved up the board. And on my turn, I could see his gallant had moved up the field because it had this screen of conscripts in front of him. And I was like, well, I don't want to have that. I don't want to be charged by a gallant because I know what they're like. So my plan was trying to take all the conscripts and then charge with my gallant into his gallant. That failed miserably on account of I didn't kill enough of the conscripts. So I was kind of at a loose end, and as the conscripts were really annoying me at that point, I decided to just charge them with my gallant, just to get rid of them, which I did, and unfortunately I didn't kill enough of them. There were still 2 conscripts left at the end, despite being stamped on due to very poor dice rolling. There was a bad turn for dice rolls for me, so I didn't kill all the conscripts, and I'd wasted a lot of firepower shooting them, so I was a bit disappointed.
Did he just then use a CP to
Yes, he did.
Pass? Did he do the guard one, which is pass on a D3, or did he use the two CP to auto pass?
He did auto pass, yeah. And I had to charge them with the gallant. So the gallant stepped on them and did kill them, but then the gallant was like in the middle, and there's nothing. It was just he was a very very angry gallant who had stepped on 2 conscripts. And then they went to his turn, where I was already like fearing the worst. As his knights fired there. All his knights had the battle cannon. He had 3 knights. One was a gallant. One had a battle cannon and the Endless Fury. One had battle cannon and the melter cannon. So lots of shots. Actually, no. They both had the Gatling. Only one had the Endless Fury, which is the Warlord. So there's lots of shots flying around. He fired a lot of shots that turn into my gallant. Took a couple of wounds off him, not too many. He then did also fire a lot of shots into my flyers, so he took out the Vulture that turn. He was probably concerned that I'd be taking out a lot of his Loyal 32 of that, and he was right. He should have been worried about that. And then the assault phase happened, and he naturally charged into my gallant with his gallant. And then there's something happened which I wasn't expecting to happen, because it normally did, in that he didn't kill me. And the reason he didn't kill me was he did all his hits. He rolled hitting on 2s. He got 4 hits. He rolled to wound. I saw him roll the dice, and I'm expecting him to need 2s to wound me, because of the power gauntlet. Sorry, no, you don't. I'm getting the wrong way around. He's rolling the dice to hit, and I'm expecting him to roll 2s. And he didn't. He needed 3s because he didn't take the power gauntlet. Because he just had a regular fist. He did so. He took endless fury on his warlord, and on his Knight Gallant he gave it the 2+ armor save rather than the Paragon Gauntlet, which I thought was an interesting choice. But the result was that he charged in and punched my Gallant and only did 12 wounds, as opposed to 24 or whatever, or to get basically. So my Gallant survived getting punched by another Gallant, and it was for me. It was very exciting. Because I was like, this is exactly what Joe and Dan told me about on the podcast. In that if you don't take the Paragon Gauntlet, you might not do enough wounds. And then he didn't try to do crush them. So I thought he might have tried to do that, but he didn't. So then I attacked back, and I did 36 wounds. And then he made a point of rolling 36 dice for his Feel No Pain, because he took House Tyrannus as well, and he did not roll enough. So his Knight Gallant fell down. Fell down and died. He rolled to see if it would blow up. It didn't. He then decided to use our Darkest Hour strategy to bring it back to life. As is the way when you have House Tyrannus. He made a very big mistake at this point, which I think probably did cost him the game. Because I think he was thinking in emotionally, because he charged my Gallant and I beat him and doesn't get back down. So he desperately wanted to bring his Gallant back, but he used the Darkest Hour stratagem on his turn, which meant that normally when you use that, it's like you're bringing your knight back on your turn, which on their turn rather. So that then in your turn you can charge what you need to do. Because he used it on his turn, it was when his Knight Gallant got up and then immediately got shot and died again. So it was a waste of 4 CPs because he used one for the reroll. And then he was on CPs and couldn't bring one back later. So his Gallant died twice in two turns, as I just punched it twice. And at this point then, the rest of my flies were sort of skirted the backfield, shooting what was left of some of his other vehicles. One thing, what was very clear to me at this point, though, is that I had been focusing so much on trying to deal with his Gallant and his conscripts that I hadn't been worried. I've been thinking about the objectives he was claiming. And this particular matchup, it was you scored every turn for the objectives. So once we get into turn 3, what I realised was that I couldn't possibly win. By objective points, so because he capped the ones in his deployment zone plus some in the middle ground, because I'd been worried about the conscripts, and the conscripts were fighting over an objective in the middle, but he had claimed other objectives. So while my troops were coming in, my drop troopers had come in to start contesting, he claimed them for longer. So it put me in a difficult situation where I realised that the only way I could possibly win at this point was to table him. And I told him as much as I'm just doing this because as he was carrying up all his objective points, I said, okay, the only way I think I can win is if I'm going to have to table you to win. I don't know how it came across. I didn't want it to sound like, I'm going to have to table you now, buddy. It was more of what I meant by it was the only option I've got now to try and win is just kill all your stuff, because I'm not going to be able to win the objectives. So I had to do. So then I had to my Tauruses drove to the far end of the board. Even though he had knights left on the board, my Tauruses were going skirting around the edge of the board to get line of sight to take out his mortar teams. I was dropping in drop troopers just to try and not on. I had a couple of squads in the reserve still that they didn't drop onto objectives, but they just went straight into the backfield to try and shoot the stuff that was on he still had objectives. I was basically firing every bullet I had. Even stuff that even though he still had 2 knights on the table, two knights on the table, I was shooting everything else he had in terms of all his troops, because they had to die, because otherwise I was going to lose. And then shooting phase wise, the Gallant would just I'd been able to bank up enough CPs because my Gallant hadn't died yet, so I had a nice bank of CPs. So my Gallant was full tilting. He was full tilting and using the have your full profile 2 turns in a row. So he was able to do that 1 turn in a row to charge into one of his knights. To which turn he just he took a lot of hits, but whittled his wounds down a little bit. He still had enough, and he punched that knight to death. Following turn, he's then trying to start shooting at my knight. At this point, I'm slightly getting a bit anxious on the amount of CPs I've got. I did take you guys' recommendation, Grand Strategist. Grand Strategist and Kuros Aquila. So, and I was very, very lucky on my rolls in this game, in that even though they've changed it now, so you can't like completely snowball the amount of CP you got. You're going to get one back on your turn, one back from yourself, and one back from them. I was making all the rolls for it, so I had a nice bank of CPs I could use. So I was able to keep rotating my iron shields. So every time I rotate my iron shields, I'd roll a 5, which is very lucky. It's like the guy Joe was playing. That's who I also always rolled 5s. But then, yeah, so my throughout as the game progressed, the Gallant was effectively just bringing himself back to full profile and charging into another knight and then punching it, because these were just regular knights. They didn't have extra written buttons. Meanwhile, the Destroyer dropped some bombs, which was handy. It finished off a squad there, and then mostly just taking out the final squads that he's got left of what troopers I do have, which worked out very well. It came down to turn 5 on turn 5 in the shooting phase. I'd finally taken out all of his troops that he had left dotted around. Slightly overkill, using things like las cannons to take out troopers. And then it came down to because he still had his warlord knight was in the middle, and I had just enough CP left that I could charge. I always, there's a point with my super, if I get to 4, I kind of stop using it, because I'm always keeping those 4 to be able to use in our darkest hour if I needed it. And because it was turn 5, I said no, forget it, I'm not going to use it. I used them to go full tilt into him. And then I had 1 CP. I used it to go full CP into full tilt into him. I rolled a 5 for Grand Strategist, so I got one of them back, which meant that then I could afford. So I had 4, so I used 3 to charge in at that, and then I wanted to keep 1 for a re-roll just in case I needed it. Because I made the Grand Strategist roll, I had 2, so I could use one of them to use rotate Iron Shields, just in case I got killed by his Overwatch fire, which was probably worthwhile, because he had Endless Fury and he did roll really well, and he did take a couple wounds off the Gallant, so it wasn't. My Gallant was on 2 wounds at this point. We ran into combat, and even though I'm hitting on 2s and wounding on 2s, I managed to roll terribly, and I only did 24 wounds. Well, I did the 24 wounds, which was what I needed to get, but then he made. I only caused 24 wounds, and he had a 6-up at Feel No Pains, so he managed to get 5 wounds back, which is a very good roll for him. So then I was able to use my final CP to death grip him, which doesn't always work night on night, because you both got the same strength in that roll off, but it did pay off, and I did crush that knight finally, and I tabled him, which wasn't a very satisfying. It wasn't quite satisfying. It was satisfying because I got to table him, but I didn't feel good about it, because it's like I was like, I'm just crushing this guy's dreams in order to win this game.
It's quite a cinematic way to end the game, and the last game of the weekend at that.
Yeah, it was definitely a good one for me, because it was all the lessons I'd learned from bringing the knight, which and all the advice from Joe and Dan about how to use one. And it was nice having it, because I feel like I've talked a lot about how good the knight was, but it's because it just does things big, and it does them well. So you're not going to talk about the time the guard squad, the regular guard squad did 10 wounds. You're not going to talk about that. You will talk about the time you did 40 in one hit. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of big ticket things you remember. So at the end of the tournament, though, I had 3 wins and 2 losses, and I placed 41st, and I was happy with that. I would have liked to. I think it would have been great if I had just edged that close game earlier, because then I could have got into the grand final. But I was very happy with where I came, considering I was a little bit rusty with the rules.
Yeah,
I did make
you probably played like less than 10 games of 8th edition, or 15 or something. Like, you haven't played a lot.
Yeah, I haven't since I moved to America. I haven't had as many opportunities to play as you guys have. So I often rely on you guys as experiences and learnings to inform myself. So I was really proud of where I came. I definitely got some good learnings from what I took. My favourite thing was that the whole tournament was that I got 2 favourite army votes from my opponents, which meant a lot to me because my army composition and or painting has often left a lot to be desired, and I really tried to push the boat out for myself with my army this time. So I was really happy with the results. So going from an average of like 0 to 1 favourite army votes from your opponents, not that the overall favourite army, but getting 2 votes from my opponents was that made me feel really good. So I was really happy about that.
Awesome, cool. Well, I guess that's it. Cheers for chatting through your results, and I guess now we'll move on to the next person. We'll be chatting about their games.
And that there concludes this segment of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, episode 11. Thank you as always to everyone who supports the show and checks us out here on YouTube. If you would like to listen to the show, or the podcast rather, in its entirety, please go over to Spotify or iTunes or any of the other available podcast platforms and check us out in our entirety. Otherwise, there will be other episodes of this broken down into all the various sections here on YouTube. So if you'd like to listen to more of the content from the Grand Tournament Heat 3, please either check out the full podcast available on all the various podcast providers that we work with. Not to say we work with them, that would imply that we're actually getting some sort of revenue out of this situation, which I assure you, we are not. But nonetheless, check us out on all the podcast platforms that we choose to pay to put ourselves on. And obviously, please let us know what you think throughout the process and so on. We're always appreciative of the comments and obviously, really appreciate all the support. So this potentially is the last podcast that we'll put out in 2018. There is talk of us doing some kind of roundup thing that may or may not end up on the YouTube channel / podcast providers before the end of the year, but I have to be honest, I'm not entirely hopeful, so I wouldn't want to promise it, but I will throw it out there as something that might happen, because you never know what might happen. Depends how we feel and how it goes. But we really hope you've enjoyed our roundup of Warhammer World's Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Heat 3. Obviously, huge thank you to Games Workshop and to Warhammer World for putting on what was an absolutely fantastic event. Me and all the guys absolutely loved the weekend. We had a fantastic time, and as we've probably laboured the point throughout the process, we would encourage any one of you listening to this, if you're able to do so, to attend some in the future, because they're super fun. So with that all said, thank you very much. Have a fantastic Christmas and or New Year's, depending on how this all goes. As I said before, we don't exactly know. But nonetheless, hope you have a great one. Thank you very much for all the continued support, and we'll hopefully chat to you very, very soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.